All right, welcome back to something that I've been working on for quite a few days now. So I did not think it was going to be as complex as what this ended up, but I'm super excited with the results. So my goal was to learn and understand more about AI agents. I've used them quite a bit, but I still don't feel like I understand how to fully get something amazing out of them. So I wanted to do something a little bit more complex, and that really is trying to write a full feature book. So the reason that I wanted to do this is really there's more than this, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to try to solve a problem that's not easily solvable with AI. So something that just a single prompt to Claude or uh, to OpenAI's ChatGPT could solve. So something that needed to orchestrate some stuff. I wanted all this to run locally. I wanted to keep the arc on track. I wanted to keep character arcs on track. And I really wanted to experiment more with group chatting. Now, I did try the dynamic approach of group chatting, and for what I'm trying to accomplish, it didn't do what I wanted. So I ended up going with a round robin approach, and that seemed to work really well. And then another goal I had was to try to figure out the best model for writing. And there are so many of those models. There's no way I could have tested them all, but I did want to go through a decent number of them. So first off, what are agents? So they really are specialized AI systems designed to achieve a specific goal autonomously. So you give them some kind of context to work with, and they go off and do their work. I like to think about this in this potential as I have a writer and I have an editor, and then I have a bunch of other ones. I'll go through each of the agents I came up with, but you kind of think about it like the writer's going to write the book, and you're going to have an editor go through and just make sure everything works right. They can communicate with another. They can pass context between each other. They can work on different parts of the problem. So, for example, I have one agent that takes the context from the previous two and then outputs it in the correct format that I want, filling in the data where it needs to go. So it has a very specific task that it needs to do. The models I tested were the Mistral Nemo 2407 Instruct, the Gemma 27 billion parameter, the Llama 3.18 billion parameter, the 5.4 unofficial version, and I tried this. I don't know how to even pronounce this. Psionic Cetacean Ultra Quality 20 billion parameter model. I landed on the Mistral Nemo 2407. I could just get an amazing amount of context with that model locally, and it performs fairly well. I did get decent results with some of the others, but really, well, the one thing I did learn from this is the prompts are very sensitive when you change models. And when you're working across a long running task, like my first book I made took 7 hours to generate, which is just insane to me because of all the iterations I was doing. And I had the max round set so high, so it would go through multiple times. So I was still tweaking it at that point. But it'll get off track. So you'd end up getting 13 good chapters. The 14th is a little off, 15th. By the time you get to the 25th chapter, it's talking about, it doesn't lose the context, but it loses kind of the formatting that you want. And um, it's really tricky to kind of get the pieces broken up enough to get the output that you want. So at a high level, I think about it like this. So I'm going to give it an initial story prompt, which I'm going to detail deeply, which I'll show you here in a minute. I then want to generate an outline. So what is the main story arc? What are the settings? What are the scenes? What are the characters? What are the things that are going to happen in each chapter? Then I want to go through and make sure each chapter is kind of planned out at a high level. And then ultimately, there will be a final chapter generated. The chapter generation process is really, I want to say complex, but it's not terrible. It was tricky to get right. And I still think there's tuning I could do on it. The big piece is really the memory keeper. So the memory keeper agent keeps track of the things that have happened in the previous chapters, and it creates a summary of those. Keeps track of the status of characters and the story arc. The world builder, uh, I've kind of got that more into the outline process now, but really the world builder is used to kind of feed the context into the chapter, so the writer knows how to kind of build the chapter around that. And then the editor and the writer kind of work together. So the writer will do something, the editor will verify that it fits within the world setting. It fits within the guidelines of kind of how we've set the story up, the things that have happened in the past, like making sure we don't get off track. It also fix any sort of errors that occur. It'll send it back to the writer. The writer will make those changes, send it back, and then it gets approved. So the initial prompt, this is a lot of code here, but basically I wanted to give it a decent amount of starting points. I landed on this about probably 2 days in, like giving it this much. I started out a lot simpler, and it will generate a story. But I had this idea for a story a long time ago that I've been really interested in trying to build. And this is well before like AI actually even was a thing. So the idea was this was an engineer that built a prediction model, built a way to predict markets. And it was insanely accurate to the point that it ultimately um, forecast something like catastrophic happening in the market. So much so that he thought it was a bug or something wrong with his software that he had built rather than something that was actually legit. But it turns out it was legit. And I wanted to see if I could give it enough to build a storyline around that plot with some of the characters I had thought about, and then see if it could stay with that through the 25 chapters. And then for the outline creation, there really are four different agents. You can think about the user proxy agent as me kind of initiating the user kind of kicking off the system to run. So that one that one will do like the initial prompt via code. So it's like, hey, group chat, do these things. And then what ends up happening once that runs, the story planner will kick in, the world builder will kick in, the outline creator will kick in. And the thinking behind this is the story planner will go through and kind of build a high level version of like what the story could be, how it could evolve over time. The world builder, based on that, will actually turn out and say like, okay, because of this story, I want it to exist in this type of world, this type of setting. And then the outline creator takes that information, combines it together into a very fixed outline, which I'll show you an example of here in a minute. The other things to touch on here is max round is 4. I have played around with setting that to be higher, but because it's round robin, I only need each of these agents to run one time. I will say I was confused a little bit about what max round meant because I had thought originally that round robin, one round would be every agent would go through one time. That is not the case. I tested this in many different ways to verify this, and I finally found in the documentation where I was able to confirm that. So the idea here is each agent is going to execute one time. Outline creator will have a very specific format, and then I take and I parse that and I save it so that I can pass it into the context of the other chapters or the chapter generation, chapter by chapter. And the chapter creation process, this ends up with, and I'll talk a little bit about what that writer final means here in a second, but this ends up with 5 different agents. Again, the user proxy one is me kicking it off. Memory keeper is so important because it pulls in all the context of everything that's happened before, and it makes it so that the writer has some of that context built into it. And then the writer takes the specific chapter it's going to be working on, and the editor then makes edits to that, and the writer final will actually take any feedback from the editor and fix it. Now, this is a place where I really wanted the dynamic piece to work because I wanted the writer and editor to talk to each other and decide when it's done. And I could get it to work, but not consistently. So I think there's more tuning that could happen here, and that would be a really cool thing to do to get sort of the AI to decide, okay, I'm done now. We will move to this one versus me kind of sequentially kind of building that out. And then I'm going to walk through this a little bit in code, but if you look at agents.py, this is an example of the story planner. And as I jump over, you can kind of see like how detailed this particular thing actually is. Like I really wanted it to kind of provide each of the major plot points. And I do think more agents could be created here. I think you could create an agent to develop a character. I think you could create an agent to develop a scene. And I think the number of agents could go up drastically. And I did actually have some of the scene stuff in there at one point, but I found it, again, to be very complex to combine scenes to get the transitions between them to work well. But I think if a person had, a few weeks to actually work on something like this, you could build a really, really cool system where you have agents that go through and develop individual characters, very detailed. And then you've got like another agent that takes that and then combines that into the story. And then that story kind of follows that arc and so on. So let me jump over to code here real quick. Let me go grab the book writer. So this is the agents.py file. So I have had a couple versions of this. So version one, I ended up generating a few books with that as well. I didn't like the way that that was working as much, so I ended up coming out with a version 2 of this. I currently have one running now because I wanted to be able to show sort of the process that this has ended up going through. And maybe before I jump too far, I am using LM Studio, and this one's currently running the Mistral Nemo Instruct 2407. And I have the context cranked pretty high because I want to be able to like fit a lot in there, especially as like chapters in the story kind of start building along. So the agents I create, so the memory keeper, you can kind of see the memory keeper's responsibilities, and it also will flag any continuity issues. I added that in there, and that has helped a bit because it'll kind of correct things that have happened in the past through the storyline. And whether that has made enough of an impact to keep it, I don't know. But this is probably one of the simpler ones, but it is very critical to be able to kind of give it, give the writer the context it needs to actually be able to write. Because you notice that it tracks in each chapter's key events, and it monitors character developments, and it maintains world building consistency. The story planner is the one I kind of talked about a little bit already. You can kind of see the way that we kind of break that up into different plot points, character arcs, story beats, key transitions, etc. Now the outline creator is this is the one that takes the story builder and the world builder and actually formats it into the right output, which I'll show you here in a second, an example of one. And the world builder, again, its idea is to really build the atmosphere, the setting, the locations, the anything that you can think about it. So you can kind of see here the sensory detail, key features. And I want to stop here for a second. I'm not a professional writer, so I'm sure if someone like Brandon Sanderson were to come and look at this, he would laugh because this is nowhere near going to be the level of work or replace anything like what he's doing. But I really wanted to just kind of understand the complexity of being able to take this big process that can't fit into a single context window and break it up into bite-sized things and try to come up with a cohesive output. The writer is the one we talked about a little bit before, and I actually think a change that I would make going forward would be making there be maybe a couple versions of the writer. One that takes feedback, and then the initial writer, like the draft writer, and the feedback one. That way I could change the prompt and tune it specifically to what job I wanted it to do. But so far, it's been working fairly well. And I do think like there are improvements that could happen there, though. And the editor here, you can kind of see the things that are happening here. It's an expert editor. Its job is to really check the alignment with the outline, verify the character consistency. It will return the completed chapter. I also have tried getting the chapter to be of a decent length, but I can't really get any model to consistently output a certain length of anything more than like 1,000 words. It's been really tricky, and I was surprised at how hard. I've even tried like increasing that number more and more and more and more to see if it just didn't wasn't counting it. I really do think LLMs struggle from writing a large block of text and thinking about an entire chapter, which is why I think breaking it up into scenes would actually make more sense because you could plan scenes, and basically what the writer could do is write the length of 1,000 words for like a scene or an event that's happening, and then you could do a transition between those scenes and actually have uh, another agent that's like generating scenes between generating a transition between the scenes. And again, the user proxy is pretty simple. I just kind of set the work directory, and I'm not using document or Docker in this particular thing. So this is the agent and how that works. Now what I want to do is kind of show you what a outline looks like. So this is really the high level outline, and this is done from that outline generator. You see the 25 chapters that are generated. Now, one thing that I tried doing is having the chapter count dynamically picked, but it was ending up with something like 12 or 13, and no matter what I did to try to influence the length of that, I couldn't get it to be longer. So what I've done is in main.py, I'm actually specifying the number of chapters. And I just pass it in, and basically I tell all the agents we are looking to generate 25 chapters. We're in the outline, we need 25 chapters. In the world builder, the story planner, anything that needs that, I can pass that into it. The majority of the code really is parsing the data. So these prompts are like what's making the agents actually work. And then if you look at book generator, this is a decent size, 377 lines of code, which isn't terrible. But a lot of it is like handling failure, extracting scenes, that type of thing. Verify that it's complete. So the bulk of the work really is just processing the data that the AI is doing. I'm not really doing much more than that. So while that's happening, what I want to do is take a look at what's in chapter 1 text here. So you can see here, um, this one actually is doing a great job at generating a pretty long story. So let me see. I've tweaked it a little bit since my last run. So while we're doing this, we're gonna do this live. Uh, to see if I've actually got the word count actually happening correctly here. So you can see here, this is the one I generated before. And this one is going to be probably a lot closer to a few thousand. Holy smokes. I have never had a chapter generate 9,108 words. What in the world? So the work that I've been doing to increase that is paying off significantly, but I'm kind of wondering if there's something wrong with this. Yeah, there definitely is. You can see here, this is being duplicated. This looks like, this looks like I've got this one. This is all good. This is all good. That's all good. And then I think like all this after this point is actually data that I'm not parsing out correctly. I need to go through and kind of figure out what's going through there. Can you see it's just repeated over and over again? Anyway, that's the difficulty of this thing. So you make any changes to it, and you end up in a situation where it's parsing incorrectly, or there's a bug with it. So I just want to see real quick. And here, I'll pull this over so you guys can see too. This is 2790 words. That is like the perfect amount for a chapter. I would need to read that to make sure that's correct. So I'm pretty sure, everything up until this point is the chapter, and then these are the scenes that are being generated. So again, I'll go through and kind of verify that. Let's see what chapter 2 does, because that ended up coming out. So check this out. This even like broke it into like characters. So this is interesting, like a silence. Uh, so you could add some descriptive text in there. Very interesting. And see, this is the chapter that I'm used to kind of seeing out of the AI. And I bet you this one's under 1,000. Yeah, 530 words. So yeah, I guess I haven't totally cracked the length of this stuff yet. It's unfortunate. If anyone has ideas on how I can like get consistent length outputs, that would be awesome. I would love to be able to crack that. Now, here's an example of a book that I fully generated. This one I went through. I haven't read it all. I've read like the first few chapters, and then skipped to the last one. So there's all 25 chapters here. And ultimately, if I go to word count here, it ended up being 21,159 words with 125,000 characters, all generated locally via AI. And this story here is a totally different one that I had an idea around. It's one that basically imagine a world where compute is very limited. So the idea is that there's a company that's kind of taken over because of some post-apocalyptic, atmosphere, and they actually use humans to like brain scan them. And the output of that was not anywhere aligned with what I had originally fed into it. So it didn't work to the degree that I thought I'd be able to influence the story. The story is actually pretty interesting because it has elements of it. It has my characters in there. It has some of the things about Triton Tech, which was the name of the and Alexander Triton. They built him out as a character. So it did everything except for the brain scanning piece. So I don't think I put enough influence on that. Anyway, I am curious what you all think about this. I have enjoyed so much working on this project, and I feel like I've learned a million things. I accomplished most of my goals, I would say, if I go back to my goals. I accomplished most of them. I do see the story arc and some of the stories get a little bit off track, but for the most part, if I read like the beginning all the way down to the end, the same characters are being talked about, the same world they're in. So it's actually doing a relatively good job, and I think there's a ton more that I actually do there. I learned a lot about how, to build better prompts, to have that memory system in there so that I could keep track of things. The editor writer combination was really cool. And then testing the different models, I ended up landing on that Mistral Nemo one being the best. I don't think there's that much difference. I will say some are just better about following instructions than others. Some will like do crazy stuff, like, and then the format will be different, and things I have to just clean up things a little bit better. So I'm still like very surprised about this chapter one. I need to go through and debug that. But I'm actually amazed that it generated like that much like content. Like it had that much in its context. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please let me know if you have any ideas on what I could do to improve it. If you have ideas on, maybe a story that you'd want me to feed in there to see what it outputs, just let me know. Anyway, until next time, peace out.